This is BankCents, the podcast that makes sense of all things banking. If there's something you don't understand about banking or finances, you're not alone. Our industry experts are bringing you informative and enjoyable conversations that break down bank jargon and dive into hot-button financial topics. And now, BOS, a community bank located across Illinois and Missouri, presents BankCents. Here's your host, Gregory Marantz.
Hello, and welcome back to the BankCents podcast, the podcast that makes sense of all things banking. I'm your host, Greg Marantz, and on today's episode, we're going to be reviewing common financial scams and best practices for protecting your personal information. On today's episode, we have Matt Stark, Vice President of Business Services from the Bank of Springfield at our Springfield location, on to join us today to discuss some of those financial scams that you might encounter in everyday life. Matt, welcome.
Thank you. Hi, Greg. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're glad to have you on. Can you give us a little bit of background? How long have you been at the bank and what do you do kind of on a day-to-day basis?
Yes, so I started back in 2009, so I've been at the bank for 14 years now. And I primarily oversee our business services and our retail online services. So all of the customer support through the bank goes through my team and my staff. And, we work through all those challenges through phone calls, emails, chat, and everything in between.
Yeah, and I think one of the most common things that you guys probably encounter is fraud on a day-to-day basis from customers of all ages, all demographics, different geographical areas. Really, all day, every day, you're facing these fraud problems. Can you give us a little bit of insight on what you're seeing kind of every day from this aspect of banking?
Yeah, fraud is very common. It's nonstop. The fraudsters love the high volume of fraud. It's not just locally here, but it's across the nation. Fraud is $1 billion industry, so they continue to try to scam and imposter other people. So one of the common things that we're seeing currently are text and phone call scams. And I think everyone would probably be aware that you get texts nonstop pretty much, whether it's saying your Netflix subscription is expired or PayPal or something to that effect. More commonly, what we're seeing now is they're actually impersonating banks. So they are texting and calling, acting as if they're the bank, requesting sensitive credentials. And it even goes beyond that, where they're looking up Facebook posts, things like that, to see, what's your pet's name, what's your favorite color, where did you go on your honeymoon? All those security questions that we try to ask and try to verify that identity. The fraudsters are getting more technical, and they're observing that and really taking advantage of people.
Yeah, I think the one thing that we talk about a lot here at the bank is those fraudsters are always trying to find a new way to get any of your information any way possible, really.
Yeah, and most commonly it's called phishing with a PH, and what they're trying to do is get as many people as possible and send as many emails or texts or phone numbers just to gather that information so they can start putting the pieces together. One of the things that, we worry about are those social media platforms, and then also the breaches that we've had across the country. There's been very large breaches that have impacted upwards of 150, 160 million residents of the United States. And that's pretty scary.
Yeah. And I think that's the big thing that we want to make sure we're reporting on to our listeners, is that it is very scary, and we're not trying to frighten anyone, but we're trying to inform everyone, because it's really important to be updated on this information and make the decisions that are most responsible for yourself and for really everyone, because as we let those fraudsters in, you don't know what could happen next. And it is really scary. But that's really our goal here today, is to really inform our listeners and help them when they do encounter the situation, because it's not a matter of if you've been tried to hack, it's a matter of when.
Absolutely. And, technology is becoming more advanced. It can be our friend a lot of times. It's a great thing. But we just have to be diligent and be aware of what's out there, what our resources are, how do we combat it, and how we work together.
Yeah, I know one of the things you mentioned is that the types of fraud that you're seeing a lot of right now are, text fraud. I know they refer to it as smishing, which is SMS or text messages phishing, and I know that's one I receive almost daily now. A lot of those are packages from USPS that need my signature so that I can receive it at the house. And that really is focused specifically on myself and my family, because I can tell you from personal experience, we have a lot of packages that come to our doorstep.
Oh, right. Yeah, and what they're trying to create is a sense of urgency, a sense of you've lost some sort of subscription, something to the emotional effect. They're really trying to hone in on an emotional trigger to really get you to act promptly without thinking through it. Commonly we are seeing that they're assertive and they're rude, and they're as bold as calling the bank itself and trying to impersonate the customer. So we're taking steps to help prevent that as well. But the diligence has got to be there. If there is a question mark in your head, slow down, take another look, and contact trusted resources.
So that, can you expand a little bit on that, contacting your trusted resource? So I receive a text message that looks like it's from the bank. Mm-hmm. What's the best step, to verify that, is this actually the bank, or is this, fraudster Joe in Russia potentially trying to hack in?
It's a great question. So the main thing that we say is do not interact with the message, whether it's email or text, directly back to that message. So what we recommend is making a phone call. So you go to a number that and you make a phone call. Or if you did get a call, go to a website and go to a chat with a bank representative or whatever company it is, whether it's Walmart or Target, whoever that is, get a trusted resource. When in doubt, just slow down. Nothing is that urgent, especially when it comes to your financial security.
Yeah, and I know one thing we also key in on a lot of those text messages as well as emails is, make sure it's grammatically correct and there's not any mistakes like that in there, or just some really subtle hints that might give you that red flag that, hey, this might not be who it seems to be. And I think you really brought up a good point when saying, take your time, slow down, really make sure you take time to evaluate the situation so you're not making that rash decision. Because you're right, they're trying to get you to make a decision as quickly as possible. Maybe you can chime in a little bit on, when they do call and verify with a bank, what are some, a couple items that the bank might never do if you're calling them to verify, is it actually the bank or not?
Right. Yeah. So the bank is never going to ask for your login credentials or your challenge questions. We already have that information and don't need to get that from the customer. We may validate certain personal information at the account level, just overall demographics, but we're not going to ask for any of that sensitive information, as we know that is sensitive and we don't want to be talking to the fraudster and potentially be giving that out to them either. So that's a couple of common things. We will not send text messages asking for credentials either. That just won't happen. We won't send emails asking for credentials. So really what we're wanting to do is verify who the customer is each and every time they call or emailing or chatting with us outside of those means.
Yeah, and I think the other thing I just wanted to bring up too is a lot of times when you call and verify this information, if the customer service representative or whoever you're talking to seems to be a little rude, or really short with you, just trying to get the answer out of you as quickly as possible, that's another red flag you kind of look out for. And I think that's one thing that, ourselves and other community banks as well do a really good job at, is that customer service aspect. You're our customer. We're going to do the best we can to help you out in any way possible. So if you see somebody being short with you or rude, that's another red flag you keep an eye out for.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, I think one of the best ways to help mitigate fraud is to be proactive. What are some best practices that you can suggest to the individuals or businesses to help be proactive against fraud?
A couple of things, and it seems kind of silly, but using technology. We have a lot of things that are set up that customers can enroll in, such as account alerts, where they can get real-time alerts anytime a transaction goes through. They can monitor their account online or through a mobile app, real-time and daily, and catching some of this stuff as early as possible is key to getting the money back. So there's a lot of services. Being proactive as far as you can put passwords on different accounts, being proactive in changing your password on a frequent basis, making it complex, and the longer the better, with special characters, anything like that you can help combat the fraudsters and make it harder on them to access your information is key.
Yeah, and I think the big takeaway there is the account alerts to me. That's one thing I have set up on all my accounts. If it goes over a certain transaction amount, then I'll be alerted that has been charged to that account. I can make sure my wife's not purchasing too many items off Amazon. But I think it's really important to monitor. Yes. Monitor your accounts on a daily or at least every other day basis, because it can happen that quick. And if you're not keeping an eye on your accounts, next thing you'll see that fraudulent charge on there, and there might not be a lot we can do then or not. But we want to obviously try to help our customers in any way possible.
Absolutely. We love to be a resource for customers, even non-customers. It doesn't really matter to us. We see it every day, and we like to be a resource for the community.
Yeah, and I think that's the one thing we want to really pass on to listeners as well. Fraud is very scary, but it's out there. And so we need to address it, and we need to acknowledge it and do what we can to help mitigate it as best as possible, because those fraudsters are out there every day trying to find a new way to hack into your accounts. They're finding new ways. They're finding different text messages that seem to work better than others. And it's really across all demographics too. They're not just targeting older individuals. They're targeting younger individuals as well who, might have those Netflix subscriptions, who would be more prone to attack like that. So I think that's one thing to really take away from this is anyone at any time could potentially be vulnerable. But if you take these steps, it will help mitigate that as best as possible. Matt, I really appreciate you coming on today and really talking about fraud. It's an incredibly important topic, and I know in the future we're probably going to have additional podcasts about fraud because it is an ever-evolving issue, and it's something that needs to be addressed. Is there anything else you want to tell our listeners or forward on to them?
I don't think so. Just be diligent out there, slow down, and use this as a resource. I really appreciate you having me on. We can talk on and on about fraud as it is becoming more and more of an issue, not only in our community, but in the communities across the country and around the world, really. So I appreciate you allowing me the opportunity to share some of the advice that we have here, and I just appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on. And I appreciate everyone listening today. I did want to forward on a couple resources for you as well. If you're interested in finding a little more about fraud and some steps you can take to mitigate that, we have a blog on our website, BankSource. It's at bankwithbos.com, and we'll be continuously sharing some educational content on current fraud alerts that are in the market and how to protect yourself. Another way to get some information out there is also to look up the CFPB, which is the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission newsletter. And you can sign up for alerts on their systems that will help alert you when these common scams start to roll out into different markets throughout the United States. There's a lot out there, so you just have to be ever diligent and ever careful. And we're just hoping to help inform you and help mitigate, the potential fraud that could happen in the future. So Matt, thanks again for coming on. Thanks for listening to BankCents. Until next time.
Is there something about banking that doesn't make sense to you? Submit your questions to us on Instagram Messenger or by email, BankCents@bankwithbos.com. Or if you're watching this on YouTube, comment below. We're happy to give you our 2 cents on a wide range of topics. Thank you for listening on Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. And please leave us a 5-star rating and review so we can continue to bring you more educational content. Thank you for listening, and we hope you join us on the next episode of BankCents.